Electricast. Welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design, where we celebrate women who are shaping their lives one extraordinary day at a time. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, self-care coach for women who are ready to make self-care a priority to support them in life and business. Every week, I'll be speaking with inspiring women from various walks of life who will share their personal journeys and will discover how they have fearlessly carved their own paths as business owners, passionately pursuing their dreams and creating a meaningful impact on their communities. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design podcast. If this is your first time listening, welcome. And if you've been along for the ride for a while, welcome back. I'm your host, Leslie, and I'm really excited to be speaking with my next guest, who is a new connection for me. Today, we're talking with shamanic art therapist, life coach, and postpartum specialist, Chandelle Vidal. And I am going to let our wonderful guest tell us more about herself. So we're going to get started. Welcome, Chandelle. I am so happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have made this connection with you. I feel that we're very much aligned in our virtues and values about self-love, self-care, being a priority, and empowering women together. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming in and just spending time with me today. So first of all, just tell us a little bit about your life, the woman, the personal side of your story, and then we'll talk about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up here, actually, in Miami, Florida, to a Cuban santera. And she was very much into herbalism, and I was very much into creating concoctions. So I've always been that child. I was bullied a lot growing up, unfortunately, had faced molestation. Eventually, I realized my mother was a baby herself. She had me at 15. My father was 17. And unfortunately, he had an alcoholism issue. So, there's a lot of things there that I would say have contributed to the woman I am today. And why is it that I feel very called to be in the space that I'm in, which is to empower women and families specifically, and how to create a really strong foundation? Because I know that in my life, I didn't really have one, and I see the impact it's had. I have 3 children of my own, and motherhood was a spiritual journey for me. And I believe strongly that every woman experiences it as a spiritual journey. They're just not sometimes as receptive to it. And so that's been a big catalyst for me to do even deeper introspection and inner work, shadow work, and all those things. And little by little, there were cookie crumbs that led me back to my soul. That's what I call them, these little strange synchronicities and people that cross my paths. But yeah, so I've designed this life around my children and wanting to leave. I figured if I'm going to give my time to anything, it was going to be to something that was valuable to humanity. And I believe very strongly that we're the elders of today and that we need to safeguard a lot of these beautiful things, rituals, and wisdom from our ancestors for our future generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you shared that about yourself, because as I said, we're newly connected, and I am really loving getting to know more about about you. So let's talk about what you do. You specialize in supporting new mothers and families during their transition into parenthood. So what transpired you to create Nurture Thy Nature and these services?
Well, I realized that the body has a repairing mechanism. So I was very inspired by understanding the anatomy and physiology. And I see where God played a hand in my life and putting me in certain places and with certain people, because I had an interest of, philosophy and an education around world religion, which gave me a really broad perspective. And so I had a really unique interest. And being born to a 15-year-old who I guess had a birth story that made her choose to become a midwife. She's a midwife now over 20 years. I've seen pregnancy since I was at least 8 years old, I would say, going to, Wolfson campus in downtown Miami with her. She was a single mother. So I got to do cool things other kids wouldn't have had the opportunity to do, which is like put butterflies into a mannequin and suture, all these interesting things. So I feel like I've been primed and prepped to work in this, and it's been more about embracing myself. And I would call it those cookie crumbs back to my soul, these things that are just undeniable that you can't make up. It's really interesting how it comes together. You have to have that bird's eye view to really see the hand of God and how things work out for you, and how you come back home to yourself and you fully embody it.
Yeah, I love that. That is so interesting to hear your story of how you even got into what you do. I find that it's very fascinating that just to be able to grow this human inside of us and then to be this, it starts off as something you can't see much about it until it's growing and then it's growing and growing. And of course, I'm not a mom as far as giving birth to any children, but I know, I love children. And I think it's just to me incredible when I see women who have these incredible and amazing relationships with their children as they're growing up. And especially now, too, like you were saying, your mom was young, but she brought you into something that you love to do and empowering women. And I think it's important that we recognize that motherhood is, and I'm sure fatherhood is as well, but motherhood is like a completely different animal. And it can be extremely challenging at times, especially when corporate America doesn't really necessarily support that, especially here in the United States, unfortunately. I grew up in Canada, so they have like a better understanding and they do support the women who are taking leaves of absence and they support them financially through the system that they've created. And it would be really great if they could do that here in the US. It almost is like they are resistant to it, but hopefully change could be on the horizon. So I would love to see some of that
Well,
happen,
I'm so glad that you brought that up because that's exactly what's driving my company. Is that's the
Hmm.
mission. The mission is to make it a kinder world for mothers to continue to have their children and be a space holder for their children and not burn out and not get into postpartum depression. There's so much, everything is psychology. There's so much propaganda we've been fed throughout the centuries. And so we've strayed very far from our true nature. And that's why my company is called Nurture Thy Nature, Pioneering in Your Self Healing, because the further we stray from our nature, the more chaos, the closer we come to it, the more in harmony things are. And so I believe everything is feedback. And I'm very much all about being the alchemist and being in the present moment and harnessing that and harnessing your psychic abilities and having your mother's intuition on point because you can't always give your power away to authorities that tell you that this is the best decision for you, your family, your baby. Especially during pregnancy, it's a very vulnerable time. So there's so much there that needs to change, and women need to stop bending over backwards for the system. We get to change the system. We get to advocate for what works best for us. But it's true, we are kind of prostituting ourselves for money because we're putting our kids into daycares a lot earlier these last several years. And there's been a high rise in behavioral issues for children. So I believe in attachment parity. There's certain things I believe in. And this is all because when you become a mom, there's a catalyst for deeper inner introspection. And so you kind of look at, how do I want to raise this little human? What are my virtues and values?
hmm
What kind of life can I design to honor our true nature? Because then once you're in it and it's very hard, you know?
Yeah. So what would you say are some of the biggest challenges or stressors that new mothers face that can impact their mental health, and how can we better support them?
Not prioritizing self-care, not prioritizing some time, not understanding that they're the backbone in the household. And the men need to also be reintroduced to the truth behind the dynamic of man and woman and how the man is action driven, also very sensitive to the family more than the woman, because the woman's the creator. She's creating and she's giving clear direction to the man, who's the protector and, yes, the provider. But it's a beautiful thing. It's just a system that's in place right now is it's not conducive for the harmonious. It wants us distracted. It wants us weighed down. It wants us burdened. It wants us burnt out because then they can continue to do what they're doing politically. That's the truth,
hmm
in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. And like I said, just knowing the women that I do that are young mothers, that have young children, and even those who may have older children is still a challenge especially when you don't have a government that doesn't really support women, because we've seen so many changes in our legislation, like what happened with some of the things that happened, some of the laws that were reversed. And it's not that I want to go and get into politics, but I've just noticed that it's unfortunate because, like you were saying, women are that backbone. They are the nurturer, the caregiver. They are the glue that holds the families together. And I feel like they're not as honored as we should be honoring both
The
our
role is not
parents.
as well.
Exactly.
Yes.
Hmm.
And that's
So,
why that's the mission, right? Is to make it a
mhm.
kinder system, a system that can support the women in being in those places that are thriving versus burnt out and crazy.
Yeah, I love that. So I have a question around your art therapy and you being a shamanic art therapist. So when it
Yeah.
comes to the art therapy and the shamanic principles, how does that guide you to work with new mothers? Do you use this as part of your teaching?
Well, I definitely do. And a lot of it has to do with the mind body connection, which is
Hmm.
really helpful during preparing for birth
Hmm.
and beyond, because now you have this child and you're going to learn to hold space, and there's going to be triggers, there's going to be new things that are going to come up and arise. This child ultimately is your sacred teacher, much like your partner that you've chosen to co-create with. So yeah, absolutely, we have to teach them how to do that through breath work. And shamanism is all about doing these different, kind of like activating all the senses, right? So you got sound and taste, and the environment is also going to help you drop into that, and breath work. And it's still sound. It's a lot of sound. It's a lot of hypnotizing yourself and getting into a different brainwave state so that you're more receptive and in tune with the intelligence that lies in the body. So that's why it's called shamanic art therapy. It kind of all came together on its own. Again, those cookie crumbs back to my soul type of stuff. And I took the class, and now I've been certified in that in particular for the 2 years. But I also had done a Reiki certification many years ago. I think now it's been 9 years. And now I'm officially master Reiki Holy Fire. But I had sat at Reiki level 1 for 7 years, and I gave back to the community for many years, collecting cases to see that, oh, wow, this works. Because in a way, you're a skeptic too, energy and like holding space and believing in yourself and recognizing that this isn't about you, it's about the other person, it's about the collective, and getting out of your way and becoming a channel, an open channel of love, and to allow that person to feel safe in your presence so that they can get out of fight or flight and they can bring themselves into a state of homeostasis, which is all mommies need. And if we can teach their partners to do that, to be oxytocin producing machines, which is the love hormone, which is what helps during pregnancy as well, so it gets it going, then that's, forget that, that's priceless, because then they'll create a deep intimacy like that as well. They'll deepen their relationship with these techniques, with this awareness of how they can do this with one another and help aid the pregnancy, of course, and
Yeah,
beyond
no,
stress in general.
yeah. So, how does the shamanic art therapy and being a life coach and postpartum specialist, how does that all tie together?
Well, believe it or not, I've had a lot of women who are in narcissistic relationships. And so they feel burnt out, and Reiki helps a lot to help them ground their energy. Everything is energy. Do you believe that we are made of energy?
Hmm.
It's a good question to ask.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I believe everything is energy first. So if you feel burnt out and you can't hold down your own energy, there are certain things that you can do as a protocol. There's a holistic protocol. You can do a lifestyle detox and then reintroduce things into your life slowly. It just depends. And these are things you assess, and that's the life coaching aspect of things. We do the Alba method, which is breath work and a yoga pose. And this helps release tension in the fascia skin. And it's kind of like doing yoga from the inside out. The fascia skin tends to hold a lot of knots and acidity, tension. The body keeps scores, so traumas can be trapped at a cellular level. It's just really good way of producing oxytocin, oxytocin, down regulating your nervous system and amplifying relaxation, homeostasis, repair versus fight or flight.
I like that. I'm like you. I do believe that they're the energy first. I feel like our emotions and our energy and everything, it all is like one thing. And how we, especially with self-care too, like when I look at self-care, I do think that the things that we typically look at as self-care. Most people think that, getting the massages and the mani-pedis and getting your hair done and going out for a nice lunch or a dinner or going on a trip somewhere. Those are all nice things to celebrate ourselves. And I think those are important because you don't want to get into that rhythm of just working to survive. You want to be able to thrive in your life. And part of thriving is actually going and doing these things for yourself. But I also like what you were talking about, looking from within and having that, it's like an energy release, I guess, of those toxic energies that can stay stuck. And that's why I wanted to ask you that, because when it comes to someone, a new parent or a new expectant mother, is this what you find very helpful to work with them through these principles as they're going through their pregnancy, so that does it make their pregnancy easier? Does it help once they've had the baby? Does it help them through, like, again, the postpartum part?
Yes, all of it, because these are all tools, methods that they can use that are mindfulness techniques that'll support them and essentially tuning into what lies inside, which is the intelligence that lies. I mean, we're all connected. It's all this machine. This is a very high end machine. It's very high tech, but people are constantly looking outside themselves. And they say God chose to hide where he thought man would never look inside. So we need to stop and go within, and then we can take actions forward. And it helps a lot because if someone coming to you with trauma, with PTSD, veterans go through this. A lot of why I also, and I always forget this, but why I also ended up on this path was because I myself was in a situation that triggered PTSD. I mean, I did not know I had PTSD. I just knew I kept hitting this glass ceiling, and I did a lot of personal development, a lot of spiritual growth, but I was just hitting the ceiling. So God put someone in my path randomly. And this person was writing a book on conquering trauma drama. And I became her right hand in finishing that book, and had to learn a lot about veterans and the suicide rates and what happens and PTSD and CPTSD. And so again, those cookie crumbs, right? God's hand in the mix. That's how I see it. So
Yeah,
it was very
love
helpful
it.
for where I am now, where in regards to being trauma sensitive, trauma informed. And a lot of people have trauma with, little.
No, I like that. I just wanted to see if I could find out more because, as I said, we haven't really had a lot of time to really dive into what you do. So I'm really excited that you said yes to being a part of this series, because I think more women need to get out there and not only be showcased about what they do, like how they're changing the community, but actually pour into each other and being able to support each other. And that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, was really to bring women like yourself, women from different parts of the world. And even, they don't have to be business owners to the point where it's like they're multi-million dollar business owners, but it's about what impact are you bringing to your community that's really fulfilling, that when you look back on your life, you're like, yeah, I lived a great life. That's really what the whole purpose of having women on this podcast is, to really be able to share, like, there's incredible women in this world who are doing incredible things, and we can support one another as we go through our journeys. And so I said, I'm really excited that we were introduced and able to make this connection, and then having you on the show today. So I'm really excited about that. So thank you.
No, thank you. And yes, for us, the mission is, and it's in our business plan, is reducing divorce rates,
Mm-hmm.
child neglect, and postpartum depression, which is still unrecorded. And they say it's 1 out of 9 women that get postpartum depression. So it's a big mission, but it's something that I feel happens when you can infiltrate from a ground level and work with parents the way we're working with parents. Because I do have the business that I have is a holistic pregnancy concierge service. We have doulas, and those doulas educate our mothers. There's childbirth education classes for the father and the mother. And so they get prepared for all those lifestyle changes. And we seem to attract conscious parents, but then there's always parents that might not be in a good situation. They have a very hard life lesson, and there's a baby on the way. And so that's kind of like what gives us the edge, and what makes us a little different is that we have all these different ways of handling it in a very holistic manner, using things like nature science and frequency medicine and mindset, things of that nature. So it really helps.
Yeah. So, what's a piece of advice or a key piece of advice that you would offer an expecting mother or their partner to help them prepare emotionally as they enter parenthood?
Yeah, of course. Together, you want to have this moment of really assessing your current state of reality, fears, what you're currently loyal to, what's it going to look like for you in the future. Start planning. Now's the time. I mean, if you're pregnant now, I would like to say it's too late it's considered too late to even plan because there's so much to think of. I would like to start advocating for people to plan even further, into a state, maybe like in their early 20s or teens, which is a whole nother conversation. But yeah, for expected parents to also heighten their intuition because there's going to be a lot of information and to use discernment and to really think about what suits them and their lifestyle because what works for one person doesn't work for everyone. So that's pretty much it. And have each other's backs. Just gotta have each other's backs and continue to have the hard conversations and the easy conversations and laugh and cry together. Those things are really important.
I love how you're saying planning because one of the things that I really advocate for is in the relationships of going out and looking for the person. Like people feel, I guess, when we're first attracted to someone, you're in that honeymoon stage. So you don't really know each other well enough to make that decision that, okay, unless you've been through some, you know, life lessons, you've learned about relationships. But in the beginning, someone I know who I thought was incredible, he had an exercise that he realized that if he wanted to attract the woman that would become his wife, that would be the mother of his children, he looked at it not just from the perspective of like who I want her to be, but who am I to be for her. And I loved how he went through this exercise because he realized that, okay, I want this woman. I've got her. She's on paper. This is who I want. This is how I want her. This is how she's going to fit into my lifestyle. And of course, we have to know what our values are and how we want our life to be so that we can be with that type of person. But he also then looked at it from the perspective, okay, am I even that person that if I was her, what she would be looking for? And so he took it to another level. And I loved that he did that. And he said when he actually started living into that, being that person, that he attracted his soon to be wife. And they've been married now, I guess, 11 years. They have two beautiful little boys. And they're living a beautiful life. They have a great family. Both families are close. His family and her family, they're all a blended family, which I absolutely love. And I think it comes from down to, like you were saying, planning. Like, what does that look like? It's not like you're planning down every detail because nobody's perfect. But if you can at least have some kind of idea of what that could look like for you, even as a mom, even as a dad, for having a child, what would that look like for you? That, in essence, is planning for that, not just all of a sudden, oh, we're pregnant. And now we have to figure out what we're going to do within this whole 9 months of getting prepared for this new life that's coming. So I
Right.
really, really like that.
So in our coaching, we call that beginning with the end in mind, which is a Neville Goddard approach. And it works really well. Begin with the
Yeah.
end in mind. Really
Yeah,
look at your
absolutely.
life and also be accepting of what is going to come with it. Because to say that there's so much that comes. People think that sometimes they can keep the same lifestyle and they have a lot of stories that they've bought into and what it looks like. It's just, you got to simplify yourself and humble yourself too, because it's a slow living. When you have kids, it's slow living. When you have a partner, it's going to be slow. So it means that you get to really sink in, go deep with the relationship, have conversations that you're always going to be evolving together. So ask questions, make it fun. That's what's up.
Yeah. So my last question, as a woman of color, because this is for the Women of Color series for Women's Empowerment Month. I call it month. I know there's only really one day that's International Women's Day, but I call it Women's Empowerment Month. That's just how I've decided to look at March. So as a woman of color, what unique strengths or perspectives do you bring to your work empowering new mothers and families? And how can we continue uplifting diverse women's voices?
When it comes to pregnancy specifically,
When it comes to just being, because you're a mom, like what your parents, they were young
Yeah.
parents, right? So
Right.
and as a woman of color, I know, especially in the communities that are, I don't want to say different, but as a woman of color myself, I know that for me, I had many challenges growing up, maybe not as many as some of the people that I know, because I lived in Canada for most of my life. So it was a completely different dynamic for me. But I did grow up in the 60s. I was born during the civil rights movement. So there were specific challenges for me, but not necessarily
There's a
to the
yeah.
degree of being here in the US. So now, through your own experiences, through what you do and people that are in your life with new mothers and with families, because even like families that are already either they have children and they're blending families, they're new moms. How can you, like, what strengths or perspectives do you think that you're bringing, especially, and I think you've really touched a lot on it, that empower these mothers and families? And then how can we continue to uplift diverse women's voices? Because I want more women of different backgrounds, white, black, red, whatever color you are, to be able to speak your truth. So how can we continue doing that? I hope that
Speak
made
your
sense.
truth. Speak your truth. And, intuition, always follow your intuition, heighten your intuition, learn about your intuition. It's going to help guide you to our internal compass. And it really supports us in making the right decisions for ourselves because, like I said, it's not a one size fits all. And make informed decisions, be educated, educate yourself. Don't just give your power away to authority because they have X amount of years of whatever. You have the right to educate yourself, to inform yourself, to make informed decisions, to not just leave it up to someone else to make a really major decision. So just inform yourself. Intuition.
Yeah,
Those are
I love that.
and
Yeah,
speak up. And speak
yeah,
up.
I love that. I think that's so important. Just speak up. I think, but it can be really scary at times to actually find your voice, maybe even going a little bit further and just saying, like, if you can be that voice to speak up first, you'll give someone else the courage to speak up second. I've
Right.
noticed that even for myself, that's been really powerful because I love being in situations where I truly do love being in situations where I can share and be open and vulnerable because I know that it's going to empower someone else to share that they might not have felt comfortable or confident enough to say anything until someone else went first. So I've been really, I don't know where that came from, the courage to do so, but I guess over time, as I've done it over and over in my lifetime, I've found that it's become an easier thing to be vulnerable because I know that there's so much growth in being vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. Renee Brown talks about vulnerability. I've never been good at vulnerability, but I've also have had to learn. It was part of the plan for things to happen the way they happen so that you could learn, and strengthen those things.
I appreciate you so much. And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing about what you do. I love that you are supporting new mothers and the work that you're doing through Nurture Thy Nature. And I know that our listeners have gained immense value from what you've shared, your perspectives, and how you advocate for maternal mental health. You truly are inspiring. And I'm so happy that you were on the show with me today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this time, honestly. And, you can check out my website. It's there, www.nurturethinature.com, and my Instagram, Chandelle_Vidal. I'm happy to support whoever needs support. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure that your contact information is in the show notes for anyone interested in learning more about what you do. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the episode. I hope you feel empowered and informed after hearing Chandelle's story. Until next time, I wish you all continued growth and joy as you keep dreaming, believing, and designing your extraordinary life one day at a time. Thank you for joining me on Her Extraordinary Life by Design. I hope you've been inspired and empowered by the incredible stories shared on this show. If you enjoyed this episode and the conversations we've had, I would greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback and support mean the world to me, and it will help others discover the podcast and join our empowering community. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Together, we can continue to learn from these amazing women, uncover their extraordinary journeys, and be motivated to create our own lives by design. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, stay empowered and keep shaping your extraordinary life one day at a time.
Welcome to Sarah Talk Solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, you've tuned into a bit of a different type of show. I'm Sarah B and I'm your host. You can find me on my IG, which is Aussie_Sarah_LA. I talk about amazing, relevant conversations and topics and what functions that goes on in this magical, wonderful, wonderful city of the City of Angels. My IG, which is Aussie_Sarah_LA.
Electric acid.
Have you ever wondered what actually happens in Congress every day? Stay informed on Capitol Hill's daily happenings with a concise, factual summary of the Senate and House of Representatives' activities from the previous session, free from bias, on the Congressional Record Daily Digest podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and discover the process from the heart of U.S. politics. The Congressional Record Daily Digest, an Electricast production.
Electric acid. Electric acid.